Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fireside Chicago, where we host fireside chats with prominent leaders from Chicago's business community, live on Zoom with Q&A every Tuesday and Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. I'm your host, Tim Shum. I'm also the founder and president of Lucas James Talent Partners. Before we get into our show today, I just want to highlight and round out our roster for May. This Thursday, we have Julie Novak coming on the show, founder and CEO of a company called Party Slate. She co-founded Party Slate in 2015. If you're in the event space, you're an event venue, an events planner, you've put on an event for yourself, your family, a corporate event, you've probably heard of Party Slate before. It's a rapidly growing business. We're going to hear her story. Next Tuesday, we have Amanda Lannert, CEO of Jellyvision, coming on the show. Jellyvision is just one of those consistent year-over-year growth stories over the past decade under Amanda's leadership. We're going to hear her story. Super excited to talk to Amanda about what's going on with her and Jellyvision. And then to round out May, we have Joe Holberg coming on the show. We're going to talk about his company and his financial literacy advice platform, Holberg Financial. But we're going to keep that show focused on everything personal finance, financial literacy. I think this COVID situation caught a lot of people off guard from a personal finance standpoint, maybe kind of caught folks with their pants down a little bit. If you're interested in getting your financial house in order, definitely check out that show. Joe is a thought leader in that space for sure. Moving along to our show today, we have our first jam session for Fireside Chicago. If you've ever played a musical instrument, guitar, ukulele, drums, keys, what have you, one of the coolest things that you can do is just get in a room, or in this case a Zoom, with your buds and just rock it out. So that's what we're going to do today. We have the heads of sales of a lot of the Chicago tech scenes community here. So just kind of rounding out our guests here today. We have on lead guitar and vocals, Emma Galler, VP of Sales of Built-In, also known as and doing business as Built-In Chicago. Everyone's heard of Built-In. What's up, Emma?
Hey, I don't know if you want me on vocals.
Okay, sounds good. Fair enough. We'll just kind of keep it to sales chatter. On bass, John Repka, VP of Sales of Paro, also known as Paro.io. What's up, John?
What's up, Tim? Glad to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
On drums, Adam Johnson, VP of Sales of ActiveCampaign. What's up, Adam?
Hey, Tim. Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And then I am going to be playing the wooden things with the beans inside. I'll be backing everybody up today. I'm Tim Shum. I'll be your host today. Just kind of kicking us off. So all of you lead the sales organization of your respective companies. I looked at the attendee list before we jumped on. A lot of our listeners are going to be salespeople themselves. We have a lot of sales leaders, sales managers. We have some entrepreneurs that are maybe at the earlier stages that are responsible for their own sales and their own sales org. We have some consultants that are one man, one woman shows that are responsible for business development. So we're going to get into everything sales today. I'm going to kick off the conversation just talking about how this COVID situation has kind of changed the dynamic of working in an office setting and managing folks in an office setting to a remote workforce. So we're recording this on May 19th. We're about 9 weeks into this COVID lockdown situation. Emma, why don't we start with you? So you were leading a team based in downtown Chicago, just like most folks, wherever their office was located. How has this change affected you and the Built-In team?
Yeah, in terms of our process, our sales process?
Just, yeah, your whole repertoire, managing the team, having reps at home for the first time. What's it been like for you?
Well, yeah, it's been totally different. There's been a ton of change. From a sales standpoint, we've had to change a lot in terms of like our ideal customer profile and who we're going after. I think our pre-COVID customer, our prospect is quite different than our during COVID prospect. And then we've also had to update like our sales decks and our personas and also our product roadmap and who we're going after. But from a team perspective, it's changed a lot. We used to come in, our team was in the office every single day, seeing each other and feeding off of each other's energy. And it's really hard to cold call by yourself when you're alone, looking out a window and you get hung up on and there's no one next to you to keep your morale up. And so it's changed our team a lot. We're still doing one-on-ones, but we're doing more regular team kickoffs and meetings and stand-ups in the morning where we're focused more on skills-based things to try to keep the team motivated and team morale up.
John, what about you and the Paro team? Same question. What's this change been like, being at your home and trying to manage the team remotely?
Yeah, I mean, I'll second everything Emma said from, an ICP and a refinement and making sure that all our tactics are up to date. But the things that I've been pushed the most on are to find ways to thoughtfully backfill what I used to take for granted in an office environment. The learning by osmosis for new reps, shadowing calls. I heard that value prop come over there, I'm going to steal that. The just genuine momentum that comes from a big win when you can high five someone next door. And it's forced me to actually be thoughtful and almost prescriptive in, well, let's make sure that we're talking about things outside of work. It feels odd to schedule a Zoom call to not talk about work, but that's what we have to do these days. And it's those hopefully not too forced, but thoughtfully prepared moments to genuinely interact, even if it's not about work. That's been the biggest change. And I think it's been the biggest driver of success outside of making sure, our ICPs are tight.
No doubt. Well, very well said. Adam, what about you and the ActiveCampaign team?
Yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of similarities. I would say, one of the things that we're thinking a lot about is like, how do you maintain rapport across the entire company? And I think what we've seen is that teams have done a nice job of staying in touch and keeping connected. But I think that same thing isn't happening from team to team necessarily as organically. And so I think that's an area that's sort of like the next phase of this, I think, for us, is figuring out how do we foster that team to team, not necessarily just within teams. So I think that's another big thing.
Have you been bridging that gap from the individual contributor level to the manager level all the way up to VPs? Like how have you, because I've noticed the cross-functional stuff being harder to attack than just, within sales.
Well, I think one of the things that I think that's something we're actively trying to solve for right now. I think one of the things that we're trying to do to bridge that is really put the customer in the middle of what we're doing. So we're looking more at doing customer highlights where we're bringing, the whole team together and kind of like putting the emphasis on customer stories and things like that. So not necessarily just rapport building or social things, but finding ways to bring everybody together, whether it's an all hands or a customer spotlight, different things like that.
We, one thing I'll add to that, across the company, we've implemented some things. So we do like a celebration Friday where the entire company gets on and people can give shout outs to each other. And it's a really good way to celebrate cross-functional wins that, like, personally, I wouldn't have even known happened during the week. And it's a nice way to give people some recognition that, they just might not otherwise get when you're in an office. And then we have a coffee program going on, or like a meeting program where you sign up and you get paired with someone else across the organization, and you might not know them at all, but you guys have a 30-minute Zoom just to get to know each other. It's a little bit of a replacement of like some of the conversations that you'd have in the kitchen, one-off, which has been really helpful to get to know other people across the org. So
very well said. Yeah. I mean, remote work has, we've seen a shift over the past decade. If you're a CTO leading a development team, there's always been hey, you can kind of work from home whenever you want or work off hours and things like that. Our firm, Lucas James, we've been 100% remote since I founded the business. We have 32 team members that are remote. But I remember back when I was getting into sales, it's really that salesperson, that sales environment where there's a lot of benefits from being in the office. John, I think you hit on this, learning through osmosis, the camaraderie that kind of builds, there's a lot of adversity that you probably deal with in every occupation, but in sales, you're just getting rejection after rejection after rejection. I just remember it was just a lot easier to get through those days when I'm locking arms with people, kind of going through those situations with me and alongside me. And I think now we have reps that are remote, and depending on their personal situation, their spouse and them are working. And if they have kids, there's that e-learning component. They have to put the teacher hat on throughout the day. If there's a, recent college grad, single, lives by themselves rep, there's that social isolation that kind of comes into play. And I think we're all dealing with it differently depending on our situations. We all have to kind of figure out how to get through this and get through the other side of this from just managing the emotional intelligence or the emotions of your team members. How have you kind of changed up your style just to make sure that your reps are in a good spot through this crisis? Emma, why don't we start with you? Sorry for the lack of quarterbacking there.
No, that's okay. Lead vocals. I'll start. So I would say a couple of things. I think it's been really challenging. I think week to week, it's a challenge to keep your mindset in the game. And so I think as a leader, this has forced me, because we're remote, to have to pay attention to the small things more than ever. And so some things that we've done that are different, and I think John brought this up, is like I had a coffee last week with a rep on my team, and we didn't talk about work at all, right? Like we talked about how she was doing and how things are going. It's hard. This is a mental game. And so I think more than ever, yes, we have to hit goals. That's what we all want to do. We want to make sure that we can make money this year, things like that, but more so paying attention to how people are feeling, because the way that they feel is going to show up in the way that they behave at work. I talked on yesterday to my team. I don't know if you guys are watching the MJ docuseries.
Oh, of course.
So motivating. It's so motivating, and it's on Sunday nights. And I wish it just would last for the next 12 weeks, because every Monday morning I wake up, I'm like, okay, MJ did it. We can do this. And I was telling them that, it's a struggle daily to have a positive mindset, but it's what's so important. And during times of adversity or defeat, I think it's channeled two ways. Some people rise to the occasion and dig deep and have some grit and get angry about it and turn it into productive behavior. And some people spiral, and we have a choice about how we react to this. And there is going to be some silver lining in all of this at the end of the day. And so I talked to them yesterday about how MJ always had that chip on his shoulder. He always had somebody that he was going after. And collectively, this has been a difficult time for us and for our team. And this is our team's chip on our shoulder, and we can either choose to rise to the occasion or not. And so focusing on mindset and talking about things like that around keeping your head in the game, I think has been really important.
Very well said. Adam, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all great stuff. I mean, I think first and foremost, our people team has done an awesome job of making resources available, whether it's mental health resources or even, programs and classes that people can take to do things like stretching at their desk or whatever, that are just, reacting to this moment and kind of what people need right now. I think the other thing too, and something I've tried to do with my team, is just be really be vulnerable, be honest. If I'm having a crummy day, I talk to them about it, and I think that creates, space for them to be open to talking to me about it when they're not having the best day. And so I think just, checking in on people, making sure that they're doing okay personally. I've spent more time, talking to some of my team members about, their personal hobbies and how they're staying busy than I normally would. And I think it's good just to have something to chat about that's not 100% work focused, and just make sure they're doing okay. I mean, one person I had a meeting with a couple of weeks ago said they hadn't really seen another person in 3 weeks. I'm like, that's, but that's a reality for some. And I think, it's important to just make sure that the human beings on our team are doing well, and that they have what they need.
Damn it, Adam, if you didn't take two words directly out of my mouth. Shout out to our people function. We joke about it tongue in cheek as our cruise activity email, but every Monday there's an email, margarita making on Thursday night, a Paro team workout at lunch, a walk here, a special spotlight there. People look forward to that stuff, and it's really bumped things up. And the second one I think is even more impactful, is that vulnerability. That I feel that, there's such a pressure on most heads of sales to be the most competent, the most competitive, the hardest driver. And at some point it starts, it's a spinning your tires in the sand. You're not going anywhere. And to, show some of that vulnerability that, hey, there is a lot of uncertainty in the market, to paint a picture of what that success is going to look like, and be a little bit more emotional, if you will, rather than, so hard and quantitative. I think that's what this time calls for. It's just absolutely necessary.
I was 24, I think, in 2008. I graduated college in 06 and entered the workforce. And I think it's very similar to a lot of the reps' experiences today, where 06 and 07, those are pretty good times. I got out of college and I worked hard and I started getting wins and stuff. And, people around me were getting promotions, and I made more commissions the harder I worked. And then the bottom just fell out of the market in '08, and everything around me just kind of changed. I had team members that got laid off. I had friends that got laid off, that got their first apartments moving out of their parents' basement and then had to move back. Family members were getting laid off. What I had envisioned for my career, what my career was going to be, or my 2008 or 2009 just went to shit. It just did. And that's a lot to take. There's a lot of negativity around a lot of people right now with this situation. Then you add the health element to it. And, you know, at least for me, coming out of that last go around a decade ago, I've always tried to train myself to never get too high. Meaning if times are good, I have a good week, I have a good month, I'm not going to cover off the ball. Don't take it for granted, because it's always not going to be like that. You got to remember those tough times. More importantly, you can't get too low too. You know, it kind of compounds itself, right? So if you're having a bad day at work, several bad days, you hear some bad news, you can't go, you know, watch a YouTube video about a conspiracy theory about, you know, all the negativity that's going to happen. It's going to spiral out of control. People need support probably more than ever, but I just learned to really just kind of stay even keeled. And I think for what the reps need to hear, if you've never been through a recession like this before, it's going to pass, man. You know, it's going to pass. You know, it's unclear how long this is going to be. We're already 2 months into it. 2 months went by quick. Recessions last between 6 months and 18 months. We're already 2 months into this thing. We're going to get through it. It's going to start to kind of teeter up a little bit, and it's going to go back to some sort of normal at some point. But it's really hard to know that or feel that if you've never been through something like that before. So I think, yeah, as leaders, you know, managing your own vulnerability and managing your own emotions, because that's going to trickle down to the rest of the team. No doubt. Anybody have anything to add to that before we move on?
I'll add one thing that I unabashedly stole from Adam, and that's to, you know, make sure that we're explicit about savoring these moments of gratitude with our teams. You know, I think that I can't think of a better insulation to the uncertainty, to the pain, to the lack of knowing than just being grateful for what we have and making sure that that doesn't get brushed under the rug. And sorry if I stole what you were going to say, Adam, because I certainly stole that concept.
Appreciate the credit there. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, and I would say this is more than just a couple, a small percentage of people who had that same experience, Tim. Like everybody who's entered the workforce since kind of '09 has experienced sort of a massive and unprecedented run of growth within the economy. And so I think this is really, you know, a new experience for a lot of people. And I think what you said is really important. I think as leaders, we should be a source of consistency and predictability for our teams, especially in moments like this. So I think it's super important to stay balanced, to focus on the process, you know, have confidence and put trust into, you know, the things that we know work well over time. And that's really how you get through those ebbs in a sales career, whether it's a recession or whether it's just a bad quarter. You do it by being consistent and investing the right energy and the right work into the things that you know will pay off in the future. So I think that's where we have to stay focused, is just, you know, being that steady sort of influence over the people who we know and work with and mentor.
That's really well said. Sorry, Emma, go ahead.
That's okay. The only other thing I was going to add is I think one of the things that that has helped me to stay more even keel and not ride my highs too high or my lows too low is focusing on what I can control. There is so much right now that is outside of our control. Like, it just is what it is. And there's so much unpredictability around how long this will last, how much worse it will get, how much better it will get, and when. And so something that gives me peace is like, what can we control? And let's wrap our heads around that, whether that's activity, whether that's coming up with creative ideas, whether that's a nurture sequence to try to keep your pipeline warm while they're waiting for their budgets to open back up. But focusing on those things so that at the end of every week, you can check it off a list. Like, I'm a list maker and I like to cross things off. And so, like, if I can end my week and say, like, okay, I gave it 110%. I had a good attitude this week. I tried this, this, and this, and I still didn't sell a deal, or, you know, I didn't move anything through into a different stage. Like, I can still at least pat myself on the back. I think with salespeople, like we're all such high achievers and we're so used to winning that if you are maniacal about only the end result, then you're not going to be happy during this time. That's for sure. And so focusing on some of those like key leading indicators of behavior, like what are the good behaviors that you need to be doing right now that you can control versus being so obsessed with the result.
I think
Just one other suggestion.
I think that's a good habit to get into in general. I mean, you focus on the inputs, not necessarily the outcome. Like how many conversations are you having? How many meetings are you booking? How much pipeline are you building? Like those are the things that will last, right? Like those are the things that sustain you in the end anyway. So those are good pieces of advice, hopefully that people will carry, well beyond this moment in time.
I found myself, changing my talk track so much more around top of the funnel, about op creation, about that pipeline, to the point that now I've had to refresh all of our dashboards to be much more pipeline oriented rather than just about that result. Have you guys done anything similar? Have you actually changed your core dashboard reporting metrics to be more emphasized, up funnel right now?
I haven't necessarily changed dashboards, but I think we've definitely been looking more at like metrics in general that are more behavioral. I think that's like another byproduct of not being in the office is like I can't hear if people are having conversations, and so like we need tools to tell us whether or not those activities are happening. And so we're looking more closely at things like pipeline hygiene and other factors like that to sort of give us an indication of how engaged are people, how on top of the work are they, like, so those are some of the things that we're doing to sort of use tools and metrics to more clearly identify kind of how things are moving through.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and then we did create a new dashboard that we're using that goes over the accounts that we think have the highest propensity to buy. And I would say we're spending double the amount of time that we normally do on strategic ways to get into those cold prospects. Being really strategic. Like I think most of us use some type of outreach tool, right? Where it sends emails for you, or some of your outreach or your prospecting is automated. I don't know about you guys, but we're getting a little lost in the email bucket. Like it just seems like the reply rate is down. I think people are being inundated with messages right now. And so we've been spending more time than ever on the activities, top of funnel activities that we need to do that will differentiate us from everybody else or other competitors in the space. And so, yeah, we have created some dashboards and some different tools to look at it, but we're spending more time there too.
Yeah, we do use we use outreach too. I think one of the things I'm starting to challenge the team on is like not to rely too heavily on that. I think we see that we have the benefit of kind of seeing how people are reacting to email right now, just given some of the stats that we can see on how our customers are using ActiveCampaign. And I would say that the more personal, the more specific your message can be to a person, the more likely someone is to engage with it. I think that's pretty clear right now. So I think I'm challenging the team to maybe think more about how can we not use tools like that and put more emphasis on personalization, especially with key prospects or strategic targets. I think it's important to do everything you can to personalize those messages. I think to try and rise above some of the things that others may also be doing.
So let's officially make it a 3 for 3 outreach.io commercial. We are happily leveraging that tool as well. Have seen a little bit of fall off from that email. Jury's still out on this, but I had one rep come up to me this week with a brand new sequence in outreach to keep the tasks in order. 100% social media and phone touches. No email. Just because, we're seeing that decline. It's like, well, let's try something new. Ultra personalization, not that you can do that at scale. I'll be sure to keep you posted on the outcomes of that, but that was just a unique approach to this kind of, a sign of the times that we're in right now. Email's not resonating as it once did.
Depending on how your product or service is perceived in this environment, obviously there's a scale of companies that are just absolutely killing it and thriving as a result of lockdown. Zoom, for example, is doing extremely well. And then you have other companies, restaurants, hospitality, M&I are in talent acquisition or talent management recruitment, somewhere probably in the middle, Paro somewhere probably in the middle. Depending on your product or service, you kind of have to pivot a little bit on your short-term strategy without looking past, this is going to turn around. It might not be a V-shaped recovery, but we're going to get back to some sort of normalcy. I like to talk about, taking out the sniper rifle and getting super specific around, to Emma's point, what are the deals that you can close now? The last recession 10 years ago, I was 24 years old. I was playing video games. I was going out every night, happy hours. I didn't really care about my future career. When the recession happened, like, I grew up big time. I don't know about you guys, either now or 10 years ago. That shit hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, there's nobody that's going to get me out of this. I got to sell my way out of this. So I got to get a sniper rifle out and figure out who's buying my product or service right now. And I got to focus there. But at the same time, I think, 2020 hindsight, we came out of that in like a year, so you can't go too far in one direction without looking at the customers that were buying your product or service before, right? So, have the sniper rifle out, but also have that machine gun out and fill it with seeds that can be nurtured and planted all over the place, because these folks are going to come around, even though you're getting a lot of rejection right now. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say the best reps on my team are doing exactly what you just said. So like, they are having a good balance between what activities, what do I need to do today to hit my quota, to talk to those customers that can buy right now, that are thriving during a time like this, or are hiring and might need our tools. And then also being more consultative than ever and leading with empathy and being really strong at their listening skills to figure out, like, what are the touch points that I need to have with this customer over the next 6-9 months to make sure that as soon as they have any opportunity to buy any tool, they're going to use us, right? Like, they're going to go to their boss, or if they're not the decision maker, and say, I got to use built-in because of X, Y, and Z. And so I think the smartest reps, the reps that are going to come out of this on the other side, are focusing on like their sales skills to make sure that they have a sniper rifle. Like, if they're not quite a sniper yet, that they're working on their skills so that they're really, really good on the calls with customers who can buy today. And then they're also mature enough to think about the long-term game of like, yeah, this deal might not help you today. It might not help you next month. It might not even help you in quarter 3. But if you do this really well and you take care of the customers and the prospects that are in your account list, this is going to help you in 6 to 9 months from now when we come out of this. So I totally agree.
Yeah, I would say we work with all different types of businesses, different sizes, different industries. I think the one thing I would recommend is, look across your customer base and figure out who within your customer base is getting the most value from your product or service right now in this moment. And then build your prospect list based on that. Leverage those customer stories, use that value that those customers and those example customers you have as a major focal point of the message that you're taking to market with your prospect list. I think that's a great way to prioritize right now, is just based on who you can see is getting a lot of benefit, because different industries are performing differently, and I think that's true. And so I think you experience that in different ways, I guess. So I would say that's one thing that we're looking at, is how can we use people who are leaning into usage, people where we're seeing increased demand from various industries. How can we use that to either prospect or market to those audiences in a more meaningful way?
Yeah, and I'll augment that with depending on your respective sales cycle. I personally consider us blessed that we have a highly strategic consultative sale that we can pull off in a more or less transactional sales cycle timeline. And hopefully not too blasphemous for anybody on the call. I've been referring to it as BC. It's before Corona, and it's a different world now. And if you do have a tight enough sales cycle that you've been able to see a first, a second, even a third vintage or cohort of clients come through that are net new, that's where I'm directing my team. Let's not try to reproduce the success of 2019. Let's try to reproduce the successes post March 15th, 2020, because that's what the market is saying, like, hey, this is in need right now.
That's really well said. Yeah, I think the depending on your previous experiences, I think we're all a product of our let's call it intrinsic motivation, the experiences that we had before that we got into the workforce, our parents, how they shaped us, but also a product of our like work environment. So Adam, you mentioned some folks that like came into the workforce post 2009, let's say, and all they've known is 10-year bull run. I mean, certain characteristics of this, especially from like a recruiter's chair, is you see a lot of acceptance of, especially in the sales ranks, like job hopping, doing a year and a half here, a year and a half here, a year and a half here. That's okay because it was a candidate driven market and there was just more jobs out there than there were candidates for because of the growth. And I think that, you could get into a sales career and knock the cover off the ball in that first year and hit your goals and get your bonuses and things like that. And I think over time, I hate to say it because it's, I came out of college and things were awesome. You get this sense of like, this is how it's always going to be. This is normal, is like, there's always going to be a job for me. I'm always going to kill it. There's always going to be a ton of buyers out there. And this is just kind of catching people with their pants down a little bit, that it's not always like that. And I always liken it to, my grandparents were born in like the 19 teens, let's call it. So they were like 18, 20, entering the workforce during the Great Depression. And they're very much, that whole generation is a product of the environment of like, there's not a lot of jobs out there, focus on the team, stay loyal when things are bad and you have adversity. And not to say it's going to get that bad, but I think it gives you just kind of good perspective on, it's not always going to be like this. It's okay. But how am I going to adapt to a situation like this? And then probably more importantly, when all this is over and we get back to some sort of normalcy, how am I going to show up on a go forward basis?
Yeah.
How are those reps that are like really stepping up in this environment? What are some behaviors that you guys are seeing that you're like, whether they hit their quota this month or this quarter, they're just going to kill it from here on out? What are some examples?
Well, I mean, I think, I don't know where I stole this from, but like one thing I talk about a lot is this idea that the high tide raises all ships, right? I think that is something that you see in people in moments like this. Are they focused on the right thing? Are they focused on how can they provide value to the customer? Are they focused on how can they add value to the business, as opposed to solely focusing on what does this mean for me? And I think it's tough to do. And I do think there's a level of just maturity and experience that helps to drive that. But I'd say the people who are the most focused on how they can help the customers, how they can help the company, how they can add value to leadership by providing real and meaningful feedback. Those types of things are really, really important right now. And so those are the things that I get excited about. Obviously, we want people to continue to find ways to be successful and achieve their targets. But I think those are the things we look for in terms of who's handling this situation the best, is by like having some measure of altruism in terms of how you approach the role, right? I think that's really important.
Yeah, another thing I would add is I think the people who are shining the most right now on my team and who are leaders on my team, like, are the ones who act like a leader. I think in a leadership role as the VP of sales, you have to find solutions, right? Like always, like if your back's up against the wall, if you don't think you're going to be able to hit your goal, if you're running into a roadblock, you don't have a choice. You can't go to your boss, your CEO, whoever, and say, we're just not going to hit. There's nothing I can do about it. And so I appreciate the reps who already act like a leader in their role today. And so they act the same way. They lead with solutions. They say, hey, I'm worried about being able to hit this goal. I'm worried about this, but like, here are some things that I came up with that I think I can do to turn this around. What do you think? And they're proactive in how they communicate that, and also don't skip a beat. And so I would say there's definitely people on my team right now, Jordan, I know is on here, being one of them, who's really shining during a time like this. And it's because she sees a problem and she doesn't bring the problem to me. She brings a potential solution, and then we talk about it. And so I would say for any other salespeople call who are looking to move into leadership roles, like that's a skill that I really appreciate, especially right now.
and I'd say, of my top performers, whereas in years past, it was likely colored by the most aggressive, the best objection handler, the hardest driver, the most thoughtful. I'm seeing the reps who are learning the fastest rising up to the top of that chart, and that being a huge determinant. It's similar to what Adam had said about altruism, because if you're learning quickly, to me, the fastest way to learn is to teach. And so the reps who are really getting out there and soliciting feedback from their peers, soliciting feedback, AEs from SDRs, AEs from account managers, cross-functionally, and the ones who are consolidating those insights, sharing what they're learning, are compounding those successes, and they're just flying up the leaderboards. Some of my top performers in the last quarter have been reps that have been in the role among the shortest on the team. And I think that is directly a testament to their flexibility and their ability to take on new challenges and innovate and push the envelope forward rather than be stuck in some old ways.
That's so well said. I think it's about mindset, right? And putting yourself in your partner's shoes, in this case, your sales leader, your manager, and saying, if I'm Emma, if I'm John, if I'm Adam, what am I going through? What do I need help with? What do I need? And how do I be that person for Emma, John, or Adam, right? So I think, what I see is a few different things. I've had a lot of conversations. Just to give you guys some anecdotes, I just talk to people on Zoom all day. That's my life in this, office basement that I'm in. And I've had a bunch of interesting conversation. One was from a sales rep, obviously going without names, but sales rep, been killing it the last 6-7 years, hitting some adversity. Sounds like they're kind of blaming others, their manager, the company, for things that are outside of the company or their manager's control. And they're looking to get out when arguably that team probably needs that person the most. I talked to a sales leader out of state that I probably talked to him March, 20th. And right when this thing was kind of kicking off, they were talking about reduction in force. And he was complaining about the company not giving him his bonus that quarter when they were talking about laying off the team. Consequently, I also talked to a venture capitalist that fired a CEO at the end of March. Fired the CEO right before all this happened. You need somebody to be leading the charge, wartime CEO, voice of reason. And I said, why did you fire the CEO? I guess there was some sort of compensation contract involved. And that was the first thing that the CEO brought up, was their compensation. And people are in a tough spot. Jobs are getting lost. And I think, John, your point earlier, there's a lot of responsibility on the shoulders of any manager, leader, or founder, CEO. And I think, knowing that everybody's going to be in a tough spot, and then your role within that, whether you're an SDR, AE, sales manager, leader, what have you, to just lock arms with your partners and get through it is gonna be how to play this for sure.
Yeah, totally.
Let's switch gears a little bit. By the way, attendees, we're going to get to questions in a little bit. If you have a question, bottom center left Q&A button. We're going to get to that for the last 5 or 10 minutes. Let's talk about your paths to leadership. There's a lot of sales reps on the line right now that, I think the fact that they're even taking time out of their lunch break to spend with us to learn from all of you probably shows that they're ambitious and they want to get into a sales leadership role. What was it for you that helped you get into that leadership role? Or another way of asking it, what do you look for in reps if they want to get to the next role? Adam, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. I remember I had a conversation with a mentor of mine when I was considering, moving into a leadership position. And I would think the best advice I got is, hey, don't overthink this. If you want to sell. If you want to manage. Whatever gives you energy, whatever gets you excited to get out of the bed and face the alarm clock every morning is where you should be focused and where you should be spending your time. And so that's something that I always share with people is just, focus on doing the job that's going to get you excited because you're the one that has to face the day every day. And so I think that's one piece of advice I would probably share. In terms of what I look for I look for people who are being followed, right? Like I think if you look around the team, if you're looking internally, like the people who others are leaning on and going to and seeking advice from, those are the kind of natural leaders that you have on your team. And if you're looking externally, I think you're looking for people who have expertise, somebody who can actually add value to the team and add expertise in areas that the team may encounter. And I look for people who are genuinely interested in the development of others. I think that's a critical portion of leadership, is like we want people who are going to, help the team grow and develop their careers, not just people who are going to leverage the team to hit their number.
Well said. Emma, what do you think?
Yeah. So what was the first part of the question? Because I was just thinking about what I'm looking for. You said advice.
Yeah. What got you into leadership? And then also the reverse is what you're looking for from sales team members, or what advice would you give?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say in terms of what got me into leadership, obviously you worked at Aerotech as well. You kind of got thrown into leadership at the age of 22 or 23 when you took on your first recruiter. But I would say what got me there is like setting up the goals that I wanted to hit, and then taking control of that and making sure that I was the one to make sure that I hit my goals to get there. So a couple examples, like I would say for those of you who want to get into leadership, there's plenty of opportunities to help right now. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of support that all teams need on like training and development, and we're all remote. And so those like learning through osmosis and sitting next to your peer, that doesn't happen anymore. And so if you want to be in leadership, like make sure that you make that known. First of all, you got to tell somebody, or tell your leader, tell your boss, tell the manager, like, hey, I'd love to help. Like, I'm really interested in developing other people. Where are their gaps? And so like I work with a couple people on our team right now where they fill in the gaps that I don't have time to do. And I'll say, hey, I need help with this. Like, we're going to do a pitch training and you're going to run it every single day. We're going to do a quick stand up and we'll take one every other, and I'll shadow you on some of them, and then you're going to run them. So I would say like make it, you don't just get promoted into a leadership role. One day you don't just show up and someone's like, great job, now you're the leader of the team. Maybe sometimes that happens, but mostly not. And so I would make sure if that's something that you want to do, then like make sure you say that out loud and you create a plan to do it. The only other advice I would say is we're going through our reviews right now at Built-In, and there's always people that I think once they are in a role for a long time or a year or two, they start to just kind of say those things like, yeah, I think I'd like to lead now. Like, I think I might want to, start leading the team, but then they don't do anything about it. And so I would just say like, make sure that if you take that stance and you want to help out, that you're being proactive, that during every single one of your one-on-ones, you take a couple minutes to talk about like, what'd you do that week to develop somebody else? And then what I look for in a leader outside of like being a problem solver, I totally agree with Adam that like I look for someone who has a genuine interest in developing others. And I also look for somebody who will pay attention to the small things and again, take action without me knowing and let me know after the fact. So like, hey, I noticed Susie on our team seemed a little bit down on the last call. I scheduled coffee with her and like, this is upsetting her a little bit. And here's what I told her, but I just wanted to let you know. Someone that can communicate up effectively, but can also pay attention to the small things too.
Well said. Perfect. John, what do you think?
Yeah. And, I was always enamored with leadership because of how much more you can elicit, how much bigger of an impact you can have with an entire team marching in the same direction you can on your own. And I always looked at leadership as I made that transition from an individual contributor to a leader is also a chance for me to accelerate my own learnings, to really mash the pedal to the floor in terms of making mistakes, learning from them, rolling them into better decisions the next time. And so, I mean, this is something that I've been, itching for most of my life. What, in addition to, I think the great suggestions from Emma and Adam as well, the only thing I would add to that is I look for individuals who can call their shot. And by that, I mean, great reps can luck into great deals. But leaders are someone who can identify a problem, chart out their solution, help me understand what the milestones along the way to make sure that we're going in the right direction, the levers they're going to pull, their contingency plans, if those aren't successful, and then achieve it. To me, that shows a mastery of leadership, of being able to lead people that most individual contributors think they want to do, but are incapable of actually demonstrating in practice?
There's, I get a lot of my inspiration and motivation, ironically, from YouTube or Instagram or, things like that, watching videos and people that have done this before. And there's the concept that I picked up, I forget who said it, just around pick out where you want to be in 5 years and make sure there's no 0 days. Every day you're doing something to move the needle on getting to where you want to be in 5 years. Don't go into the weekend not moving the needle on where you want to be. Consequently, the decisions that you made 5 years ago had led you to where you're at today. So Adam, John, and Emma, there's probably things that you were doing to drive towards where you are today. And I think that reps just really need to think about that long-term. Emma, you mentioned like 1 to 2 years, like, okay, I want to be a leader now. I'm kind of bored with this. Let's kind of do that. What are you doing to get there? You need to be pushing yourself outside the comfort zone. The skills that make a good rep do not make a good leader. It's very much a people role, and it's not pretty all the time. So those could be things like, okay, what are you doing outside of your job description, your day-to-day? Emma, you mentioned, I thought it made a ton of sense. There's a lot going on right now. Mm-hmm. Emma can't be everywhere at once. So if you're kicking butt and there's some people struggling, try that leadership cap on. Try those talk tracks. You have to be an influencer. You got to get people that are down up again. You got to high five people when they're doing a good job. You need to get off the phone with someone after 5 minutes and then change the behavior of that individual. Try doing that shit now, because it's not easy and it's not for everybody. I mean, it's not for you and you're not motivated by that. Maybe you should rethink why you want to be in leadership in the first place. I think there's a lot that kind of goes into that. There's a lot of, I'm in recruiting. The director of sales requirement, the opening, it's one of the toughest roles to fill. There's a lot of reps that want that role. There's a lot of applications, but there's not a lot of good people that can fill those roles. And that's why it's typically one of the most sought after jobs. So if you're a rep and you want to be in leadership, maybe it's not 5 years, but start doing stuff today in order to get there. Hey, anything more to add there, guys, before we move on?
If I could real quick, I think one thing I would say is if you think about landing the job you want as a sales process, and you are the product, right? You have to, every good sales process starts with great discovery. So think about, how do you find out what are the things that are important to, the hiring manager? How do you demonstrate your skills and abilities and how they align to the role that you're trying to acquire? What proof do you have that you can do those things, or that you have executed those things? And I think that's, that's the way you do it, right? You have to sell yourself into that role. And I think, a lot of people are just not good at that. A lot of people are not good at advocating for themselves. A lot of people are sort of kind of sit back and wait. And if you think about that in the context of selling the product or service that you represent, how often have you won a deal by just kind of sitting back and waiting for the customer to anoint you the vendor of choice, right? It doesn't happen. Yeah. So I would say, think about yourself as a product. How are you improving your features? How are you adding things to your, to your sort of feature set that are going to be interesting and attractive for the role that you want, a few years or more down the line.
Man, Adam, I love that. Right. You're selling yourself. That's a sale. It's a process like anything else. The other thing I just see is, I think the biggest difference between the interview process and a sales process is great salespeople are storytellers. I personally believe. And for some reason, they drop that when they start talking about themselves in a role. And now they start reading from a bulleted list. It's like, what the hell are you doing? Tell a story. Tell your story about why this is the logical next step and why they need you.
Especially for leadership.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'll add that I think is just timely right now is I remember when I got promoted into my first ever true leadership role over an entire team, I struggled a little bit with my peer group and what I could or couldn't say to that group. It was the group I used to go out to beers with, and we would all complain about things, right? The boss or the company or the job. And I think as you get into a leadership role, you can't do that anymore, and you lose a little bit of that sense of belonging. And I think as I've watched people move into more, leadership roles, the ones that get the job are the ones that start acting like that before they have the title. They start acting like a leader, meaning our CEO always talks about like vent up, meaning you can vent up to your boss, to your CEO, to somebody. Don't vent down and don't vent sideways. It's not productive. And especially during a time like this, when there's so much to vent about, there's a lot we could complain about right now. And so I would say the people on my team who are also the most invaluable to me right now are the ones that I know are helping the team keep a positive mindset and not engaging in conversations that aren't going to help anybody right now. Because as a leader, you don't have the opportunity to do that.
I love it, guys. We're gonna switch to Q&A real quick. We're not gonna get to every question, I don't think. If you guys are going going a little bit over 12:30, I think we can get at least a couple in. Alexine Mudawar asks, shout out to Alexine from Logic 8. Thanks for the question. Have you seen top performers become leaders successfully? So I'm envisioning the top rep in the office, the top rep in the country. There's been a lot of chatter about this topic on LinkedIn. So curious of everyone's thoughts.
Yes, 100%. I think like what you see is people go negative on this because I think, the concern that you make the assumption that just because someone is a great individual contributor, that they will also be a great leader. And those are different skill sets. So I've seen top performers transition exceptionally well into leadership roles. I've also seen that go horribly wrong because they're just they don't have the same characteristics. The other part too, like to the point, like sometimes people just assume that's the thing that they should do. Like I've seen people top performers transition into a leadership role and then realize that they hate the work and it's not what they want to do. I think the reality is like, it doesn't have to be the path. Like you can make a great living, you can have a great career as an individual seller. You don't have to progress into leadership if that's not the thing that gives you energy. And so I think that's where like a lot of people are putting a stake in the ground saying like, don't always assume that your top rep will be the next best manager, but you also shouldn't assume that they won't be, right? I think it can work either way.
Yeah, and I think it depends on what that top performer is motivated by. I mean, a non-negotiable for me is if you get into a leadership role, you also have to be a top performer. It's hard to coach people and manage them in a role where you weren't able to do it successfully. And so that's kind of a requirement for me, but I think it matters on what you're motivated for. I think we all know people who are just amazing sellers. They are kind of the lone wolves. They like doing their own thing. They're motivated exclusively by money. I probably wouldn't recommend that type of person to go into a leadership role because it's really hard to be only motivated by money when you have to lead a team. There's a lot that you can't control. And so I think it's a totally like case by case basis. And I agree with Adam that I don't think you can assume that just because you're a top performer also means you're going to be a great leader, because those are not one and the same. But top performers in my mind are a requirement too, to be a leader. You have to had to be good at the job.
Mine as well. And a parting thought, this isn't a silver bullet, but how did they become a top performer? If they're a lone wolf who's pounding the table to get their enhancement push through product and they're stabbing AMs in the back, like, no, they're not going to be a great leader. But if they're building bridges cross-functionally, showing that peer mentorship, ramping up new AEs, like, I think if you really push yourself, you can kind of tease out more often than not who is well-groomed for this and who's not.
The only other thing I'll add is I think there's a difference between the word leader and manager. There are people on my team that are amazing leaders that I don't think would ever want to manage a team. Managing a team is hard. A lot of the role can be mundane and it's repetitive and it's difficult, but there are people on my team that I would consider to be lone wolves that have amazing influence on our team and are leaders. I would call them leaders of our team. Do they have direct reports? No. But do they lead people? Absolutely. And so I think that there's a big difference between how we distinguish a leader from like a manager with direct reports as well.
That's well said. That's well said. Yeah, I Emma, you were there. We worked together in the past. I was one of those like top performers, and I liked just having to worry about Tim, but I also did the other things like help everybody out. Like my parents raised me well, I feel like. But then once I got into leadership, it hit me like a ton of bricks that it is really hard. You have to be okay calling people out, having tough conversations, making sure that people are culturally aligned with what you're trying to do at the organization. And then look at where you sit on the IQ versus EQ spectrum. Not to say I'm smart. I just lacked, EQ skills kind of coming out of the gate. I wasn't one of those like rah, I'm in it with you, big bros kind of managers, leaders at the start. And I had to learn that skill set. I kind of drifted towards some of the reps that were just like very, very much intrinsically motivated to do extremely well. And I looked at my job as like, I just got to teach those people how to get there. But what you miss out on is like your role as leader is different every day with different individuals. Someone might need some inspiration one day. Someone might be like down in the dumps and need you to take them out of it. Somebody might be getting too entitled and need to be called out a little bit. Someone might have chatter that's making the culture negatively impacted. And you need to call that person out because that's going to impact your goals. And I think once you realize that you need to be an actor and play the role of that manager leader and start developing skills towards that, whether you're like the top rep or number 2 or number 3 or number 5, it doesn't matter. It's just the better that you're going to do in the job, regardless of what you did in the past. So great question. Suzanne Lynch, hey guys, do you find some reps are making more outbound calls because they are more comfortable speaking in private rather than next to their peers in an office setting? So more outreach, more output or inputs, because of a remote environment.
I can go. We haven't seen a significant increase. We tested a tool out last week where it was like a dialer system. So that made a ton of calls for us. But it doesn't really count. But no, we haven't seen a huge increase. I will also say, I think we've struggled to get people on the phone in some ways because unless we have their cell phones, a lot of people haven't connected their office phones to wherever they're working remotely. We have been trying, and it was making me laugh on Friday. My rep was sending me all these videos. We have been trying LinkedIn videos. You can send them on your phone. And so he was like sitting in his kitchen, like recording himself 3 or 4 times and sending them to me. He's like, what do you think? What do you think of this one? And so we are trying like creative stuff. And I think people are more open to it because like what I've been telling him is like, literally, what do you have to lose? I mean, who's going to laugh at you? Like your dog or your roommate? Who cares? And so we have been trying other things. I wouldn't say that I would say that I've seen our call volume skyrocket.
Adam, John, anything to add?
Unfortunately, not on this one. Haven't seen it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's something that we have kind of like anecdotally heard. I don't know, and I think that's been something that but we saw that in the office, like people would separate themselves if they weren't comfortable, making calls in a row. So I think people who needed that space were finding it. So I don't think we've seen like a huge change in behavior necessarily, because I think they were kind of operating in that way even pre work from home.
Well said. Yeah, I mean, like I said, we've been 100% remote since I started this business. Working from home isn't for everybody. Unfortunately, with this situation, everyone's being forced to. So if you thrive in that office environment and the camaraderie of others, and your friends are in the office setting, and that energy rubs off on you in order to make you be successful, you have to kind of find out what your like home repertoire is. For some people, it's routine. For some people, it's, like rocking out to rock and roll, alternative rock, AC/DC before hopping on the phones. Like find out what it is for you in order to kind of get in that rhythm where it's one after the other. Maybe break off the day a little bit. Maybe it's just like you're going hard in 30-minute segments, 5 minutes off, take a little breather, check your phone or whatever, 30 minutes back on again. You have to kind of change up your repertoire if you thrived in a office setting. So we're going to leave it at there, guys, right at about 60 minutes on the spot. I really appreciate the 3 of you with all of your busy schedules, with everything that we have going on, taking time out of your day to pay it forward, not only for the benefit of Fireside Chicago and the show that we started, but all of the attendees and the listeners. So Adam, thank you so much. Emma, thank you so much. John, thank you so much. I'll just kind of end it with, they're all on LinkedIn. Connect with them, reach out. Great leaders, pay it forward kind of mentality. Any kind of closing thoughts? Adam, we'll go Emma, then John before we shut down. Adam, you first.
Yeah, just want to take a second to model the behavior, moment of gratitude. Tim, thank you so much for doing this. John and Emma, it's been great getting to know both of you better through this process, and have really enjoyed kind of hearing your take on all these things. So this has been fun.
Thanks, Adam. Emma?
Yeah, same. Thanks for hosting. Definitely stay in touch. Anyone who's listening, feel free to add us. I'm more than happy to help out in any way that I can. And again, I know I said this earlier, but just focus on what you can control. You're going to drive yourself crazy with all of the things you can't control or all the things that we don't know. And so focus on what you can control, make a list, check it off, and then be proud of yourself at the end of the week, regardless of the outcome.
Excellent. Well said. John, final thought.
For all those sales reps, managers, leaders, aspiring salespeople out there, keep fighting the good fight. In no uncertain terms, we're keeping these companies alive. We're keeping them thriving. We're keeping them growing. Tim, thanks for having us. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. Be well, guys. We'll talk to everyone soon. Take care.